Friday morning, everyone. We made it to the end of the work week. Good job, everybody. I'm Matt Geica. This is Geics Got Game, found on the River's Edge, riversedgepgh.com. Spectacular to be here with you. This is every Friday morning from 10 to 11, and I'm not just saying I give you the gift. You give me the gift by giving me the opportunity to chat with you for about an hour on sports and other stuff. Sometimes it's sportsy sports, and we'll have a lot of that on today's show. The Penguins and their home and home against the Islanders. I love home and homes. I wish that the NHL did more of those. It's exciting. It feels like a mini playoff series in some ways, and it adds to the intrigue. Although the results didn't go the way that most of you would have probably liked this week after that triumphant Canadian road trip. Also, I'm back down at the island this weekend, Robert Morris and Niagara, and I'm going to make all of you college hockey fans by the time this season is over with. That is my express goal here. The Pirates had some off-season moves, more like departures than anything else, although maybe one or both, in fact, could end up being a little deceiving in terms of the actual news there that occurred yesterday. So we'll dig into that. Also, is there a chance that we could see a Pitt Stadium Part 2 somewhere? James Santelli's ears perked up. I know he was excited about the athletic director, Heather Lyke, talking with the media this week and not ruling out the fact that Pitt could eventually return its football team on top of Cardiac Hill and get him out of Heinz Field. It could still be a while, but that's the first time anyone from the university has said anything like that. So that got people's antenna up this week, including my own. Again, I am Matt Geica, though. Before I get into the meat of today's show, I want to let you know you can find me on social media. You can spell my last name, first of all, G-A-J-T-K-A. You can find me on Twitter, at Matt Geica. No spaces, no underscores, no nothing. When you have a name like this, it's easy to lock down a username that's rather simple, or at least simple in my terms. I've been looking at that name my whole life, so it's easier for me to get my head around it. I'm also on Facebook, Matt Geica Media. That's where we exploit the Facebook Live platform, and I use that verb literally. Sometimes I wonder, why am I still on Facebook? Then I think, oh yeah, Facebook Live is pretty cool, and I enjoy that, and we do use that platform both here and also for my play-by-play broadcasting for Robert Morris University on the road, and also Pittsburgh Hockey Digest calling local high school hockey games. So it's not all bad over there, right? At least that's what I tell myself every time I hook up there. So also, before we get into what I want to talk about in the opening segment this morning, I'm doing some giveaways. We have a couple of Mr. Small's Café t-shirts. In fact, I'll hold one up for the camera here as Brian Crawford has passed those along. So I'm going to give one away on Twitter, one away on Facebook, and all you have to do is respond back and tell me the word that's on the t-shirt I'm wearing right now. So you have to access the video feed, whether it be at riversedgepgh.com/live, or go to Facebook and my page, the River's Edge page. Plenty of ways to track down the show. Again, it's Matt Geica Media, G-A-J-T-K-A. That's where the stream is emanating from, in addition to River's Edge PGH on Facebook. So again, yes, social media giveaway time. That's a first for this show, but I like it. We're promoting Mr. Small's Café, daily sustenance and box office, coffee, eats, and spirits. I've had two of those. I've had coffee and the spirits. In fact, I've had both of those in one cup down there with some interesting concoctions that are being brewed. One level below us, in fact, here at historic Mr. Small's Theater in Millvale, Pennsylvania. So there's that. But as you might imagine, I talk about where sports and real life intersect, and well, there was no greater story, maybe in all of America, possibly even in the entire world last Saturday. Unfortunately, the eyes of America, the eyes of North America, the eyes of the world were on Pittsburgh for a reason that none of us would ever wish, obviously. And that was the killing of 11 Jewish folks at the Tree of Life Synagogue in the neighborhood of Squirrel Hill. And it occurred Saturday morning. Several others were injured, including some heroic cops who were in there trying to break things up and trying to bring the perp to justice. It appears that has been done. It appears that the man who committed these awful crimes will be put away for a long, long time, if not taken off this mortal coil. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about how you went about trying to have some positive significance in the world. And I've been gifted with a greater platform than most, whether it be on social media or other places like dogoodery.org, the new website that I've started with my friend Rocco DeMero and others. It never felt more appropriate to have a website like that than last weekend, as we're talking about trying to do good in the world and trying to lift people up, and that's exactly what we need. And as I wrote earlier this week in my Live Well Lucas journal, that's the best way to fight the forces of darkness, is to do good, to shine a light. And I forget which religion has this saying, but there is the saying, it might even be Judaism, in fact, appropriately, that the smallest bit of light can dispense of the largest expanse of darkness. And it's funny how that can work out and how that can spread, and how you doing a good thing, doing a mitzvah, in Yiddish, if you will, can make everyone feel like they can have a positive effect on the world. So last weekend, as I was preparing for a Robert Morris men's hockey game against RIT down at the Island, tough to focus on that, obviously, but also when you're in a position like I am, I have control over my own Twitter account, 12,000 followers, a lot of subscribers on social media overall, if you count Facebook. Plenty of friends and acquaintances I've made, and with also control of the team account for RMU men's hockey, you wonder, what can I do? What can we do to try to make this a productive experience and try to move past this and improve as a society? What can we do to express our condolences? And what can you do in a situation like that? And we've all been to funerals. We've all been to situations where we feel like, what can we even say to make someone else feel better or to improve their worldview? Maybe you can't say anything, and maybe that's arrogant on our part to feel like that we would even have that chance. But to be there and provide comfort by our presence, I think is number one. And that's why on the RMU Twitter account last week, I simply posted a photo of our team and RIT lined up at center ice and us observing a moment of silence for the victims of the tragedy in Squirrel Hill, because I felt like there's nothing else that we could do. We're not going to play for you. Winning this game isn't going to do anything. I don't care if you're the Penguins, the Steelers, or us, a team with a much smaller following. It's just not going to make that big of a difference. But it does make a difference, I think, to show that you're thinking about someone. So that was the route I decided to go down and try to pursue. I'm not saying that was right or that was wrong, but I felt like minimalism was the way to go with that, and not to pretend like that our sporting event had any kind of real impact or significance other than maybe helping a few people forget about or take their minds off of it for a little bit. You don't want to forget about it, and I regret I even used that word, because the idea is not to forget. The idea is to make changes because you remember, right? And the idea is to try to eradicate hate in this case, and to condemn hate, and better than that, to counteract it with good being done on the streets, not just on social media. And I think that's also part of the intoxication of being on social media, having a quote-unquote audience, no matter the platform, is that you feel like you can do all these great things, but in reality, it's just words. It's just pictures. It's just video on a platform that may or may not exist 5 years from now, may or may not exist 2 years from now, or 2 months from now, for that matter. Who knows what's coming next in our world or in technology. So it's all quite ephemeral, is what I'm saying. This isn't exactly writing down a sonnet or a poem or a short story in a book that might end up in a library. And I guess who knows how we'll archive all these things in the future. I know that we have to adjust with the times. This is how we communicate more these days than any other way. It's not the written word. It's not the printed word. It's the digital word. And I use word liberally in this case, meaning all forms of it, all forms of media. So maybe not minimize it as much, but also realize that the next thing is coming down the pike. So how can we get out there and do something for the cause of good? Can we contribute money? Can we show up to vigils and support groups and things of that nature? I think all those things, showing up in person, I believe, has more of an impact now than it ever did, because it's more of the norm to just send your well wishes via Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, or email. When you actually show up, I think that can actually have much more of an impact than it ever did in the past. And just because it's rare. And I think that it's important for all of us to realize that if what we do on social media or online doesn't translate to something in real life, IRL, then it's pretty much worthless. So while messages can inspire people and, well, just in general, controlling our thoughts and making them work for us is obviously a productive thing. Let's get those boots on the ground, for lack of a better term. And that's why, for instance, at Do Goodery, the website that I've mentioned a couple of times on this show, and you can find it at do-goodery.org, we're focusing on nonprofits and their real efforts to make things better. And that's why, a lot of us, I think, for the most part, if you're a hardcore sports fan, yeah, you see the charities that sports teams start and the charities and foundations that athletes start and run, and you think, oh, well, it looks like it's good PR, right? But what do they really do? Well, this is the time to contribute to those causes and help them be more effective. And not just shrug it off and say, well, someone else will do something good. I'll just pay attention to the scores and the highlights and the stats and all the attendant controversies of sports and all these things with which we attribute meaning. Yes, in some cases, everything is artificial construct. Everything is, in a way, personally created in order to give us significance and give us motivation to go about our day, right? If we didn't attribute meaning to something, then we wouldn't believe in it, whether it's religion, whether it's nonprofit, whether it's going to work to do your job in whatever field that you're in. For me, it's media, so you do see more of that immediate impact and that immediate feedback. But we all have to have our motivations and our reasons for getting out of bed in the morning. And for me, it's to try to find significance in helping others and being productive. And I don't always hit that mark, but we need to be reminded every now and again that there are people out there in real need, and we can help them. And I don't think we need that reminder this week in Pittsburgh. It's less than a week after what we saw in Squirrel Hill. So I just think it's on all of us. We all have a responsibility to use whatever platform we might have, and those of us with a bigger platform have a bigger responsibility. That's just the way it is, with the privileges and with the ego boost that comes from having, in my case, 12,000 followers on Twitter. And yeah, it's given me an ego boost in the past. I'm not going to lie about that. But with that comes the corresponding level of responsibility to be a good citizen and to be careful with your messaging and make sure that you're not contributing to hate or further division in our society. That's the last thing we need, I think, at this point in time. Like, I need to tell you that as the midterm elections are coming up and every other ad is a political ad. Heck, every ad was a political ad the other night when I was watching the news. So, yeah, I don't have to tell you that it's increasingly difficult to push that noise aside. Not that it's all noise, and we need our politicians to be effective. We need to believe in our politicians, honest to God, because otherwise, how else do you affect change, right? You have to believe that someone out there is working for your good, or run for office yourself, I suppose, is your alternative there. But the point is that we need to keep our faith in these structures, and I think one of the ways to do that is to find a way to be a positive force, no matter how you may be able to do that, and whether that's out in real life or on social, or ideally both, right? Because a two-pronged approach is better than a one-pronged approach, at least in my mind. You're listening to Geiks Got Game. Thank you again for both listening on the River's Edge stream there, riversedgepgh.com. Again, I'm trying to give away Mr. Small's Café t-shirts. All you got to do is tell me what's on the t-shirt that I'm wearing. Access the video feed at riversedgepgh.com/live. I'm giving away one t-shirt via Twitter and one via Facebook, so you have about 40 more minutes to cash in that way. And support a great local business, not just Mr. Small's Theater, but the Café, which you may not know about here in Millvale. Back in a moment, yeah, we'll get more into sportsy sports talk after this break on the River's Edge.
Hey folks, it's Mike Sasson of The Mike Sasson Show. Me and Alex, my producer extraordinaire, looked at the landscape of internet radio and figured if we want to make it, we've got to work at least an hour earlier. Now on at 9 a.m. every Tuesday on the River's Edge on New Kind of Radio.
Hey, we have a winner already on Twitter. The internet is undefeated. Not only did Timothy Ponser, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, tell me what I was wearing right now by accessing the video stream. And yes, that was a cheap ploy to get you on board. I appreciate that and appreciate you indulging me there. But also, he sent the JPEG of the shirt, the Pittsburgh Bridges is it's a mock-up of the Three Sisters bridges, if you will, the ones over on the Allegheny River, right near the point. What is it? The Clemente Bridge, the Warhol Bridge, and the Rachel Carson Bridge. So, we're gonna switch mics in stream. Look at that! Oh my gosh, Brian Crawford just. Well, we're in sync, my friend. Anyway, I'm sending you this shirt, Mr. Timothy Ponser, and also if you're on Facebook and you're just listening right now, just put a comment there on the video, and we will get you your Mr. Small's Cafe T-shirt. So, still one up for grabs here. And Brian, what do we have? Do we have 3 of these to give away? You said
we can.
We can.
Yeah, we have.
Okay. Goodness, I'm trying to think of a different way to get someone to win another T-shirt. I guess we'll see if we get a Facebook one here and then. If we give that away later in the hour, then we'll go for a third.
More.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, Brian, before you go, you've been to Mr. Small's Cafe, I presume.
I have.
You're a big fan. What do you like best down there? What's your favorite, whether it be drink or food item?
So food-wise right now, I've always really been a big fan of the tropical tacos that have this mango salsa on it. I believe it's mango, but it has, they throw jalapenos on it, everything. You can get sriracha. That's probably my favorite food, but they have a good Reuben now that's kind of competing with the tacos. And then I'm always a traditional latte fan. So they have all sorts of crazy drinks that have coffee and alcohol.
Yeah.
Because they have a liquor license as well. But I'm a classic latte guy.
Okay, so you like your latte.
I like my lattes.
I feel like, what did I have? It was the goodness. It was like a White Russian with coffee, basically.
Yeah. It's great. That's what I mean. That alcohol and coffee blend. Mm-hmm. For someone like me who usually is there after work, it's really, really nice because you want to have a drink after work, but working overnight, you're super, super tired. So the mixture of the two is fantastic.
You want a little bit of both. You have to be careful sometimes when you mix your stimulants with your depressants, but in this case, I think it's okay. Speaking from someone who's had more of his share of Jaeger bombs in the past, back in my college days. Yeah, that'll maybe keep you up till 5 a.m. when you don't want to be up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
But
or
at any
2
rate,
in the afternoon.
Or right. Well, in your case, the whole timeline is flipped.
The whole thing is messed up.
Right. And enjoy the clocks turning back, by the way, this weekend. I know that's always
it's
fun.
It's weird when you work overnight because you don't really. It doesn't affect you at all.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, because you're awake. So.
Yeah, exactly. You know what's been hard for me is getting out of bed. Because at 7:30 it's still dark out, so I'll actually welcome that. I'm one of those who goes by the circadian rhythms pretty closely. So if it's light out, I can't sleep. At least not in the way I'm living right now. Maybe if I were like you, I would have to, so there'd be no choice, right? Anyway, that's Brian Crawford. River Talk, what's coming up this week?
Well, tonight we're going to be at the landing, Rocks on the Landing, which is a bar out in McKees Rocks. And we're going to be there with Jay Cooper, Howie D. Mack. Right before the Pick Your Poison event, which starts at 8, we'll be on from 7 to 8. So come on out to that. That's a great comedy show that Jay and Howie have put together. And then this coming Sunday at 7 p.m., we have Connor Lamb calling in 2 days before the election.
Look at you, Mr. Big Guest.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
And then the election night, 8 p.m., right here as the polls close, we will have election coverage with some great people who are involved either as an activist or involved in some way here in studio, and we're going to be focusing on local stuff primarily, and that's something that you're not going to get anywhere else because everyone else is just going to be talking about the makeup of the Senate and the House.
Correct.
Don't worry, we'll talk about that, but we'll also talk about the other local stuff as well.
Oh yeah, plenty up for grabs. You know, if you believe in Connor Lamb's platform or not, I like the commercial he's running right now where he just talks right into the camera. In this age of flash and dash and fancy video editing, I feel like that stands out, right? He's sitting there. It's a tight shot. He says, "I will not take away whatever he says. Social Security. It's a sacred promise. All that. But you see, the message stuck with me because it's just like a guy talking to you, as opposed to boom, bang, flash, whiz, all these cuts in 30 seconds. I sound like an old man now, but it works for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what he has to say. He seems to be more of a moderate Democrat, which is interesting in this age of just extremists on so many sides. People are just so militant in their passion for their political ideology that they're unwilling to really even have a conversation with anybody, which is kind of terrifying to me. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to hear his thoughts on that, and it's just something that really you don't see in either party nowadays. So I think that'll be cool. And yeah, I think it does make a difference. I mean, obviously it's doing well for his campaign. A source who I cannot reveal has told me, that he's up by I think 20-some points under his opponent's polling. So
man, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? He has the benefit of having that sheen of a recent winner, right? He just ran 6 months ago
in a special election, nonetheless. So he got a lot of national and international press over that.
And I know the districts were redrawn and all that with the reversal of some gerrymandering tactics, but. I think a lot of people who voted for him the first time are saying, hey, I want to see what he can actually do because I just voted for him 6 months ago.
It's true, but a lot of those people can't vote for him because of the way the redistricting has laid down. Most of the people that were in his district are no longer in his district.
Well, actually, I think...
he's in a different district, technically.
Yeah, I couldn't vote for him or against him the first time, but now I can. So I'm the opposite way. So I don't know. I suppose that's for the pollsters and for all the political scientists to mull over before Election Day on Tuesday. One thing we can say, go vote. Get informed first of all, and then go vote.
Please, at least Google the candidates before you go vote. Everyone is always this big get out the vote campaign. And
but also learn something, right?
That's my thing. I'll be honest. I'm one of those people. I want everybody to go out and vote informed, but I honestly don't want you going and voting if you've never even Googled the candidates. So
yeah, that could be dangerous too. You know, you have to Google too. Just look up your ballot. Because you have all these propositions and levies and whatnot. In a lot of cases, those are more important than who's actually in the offices because that stuff can stick around for a long time. And you may not like where your money's going. You may love where your money's going. So those are always the ones that catch me off guard because I'm so focused on learning about the candidates. And I'm like, oh, crap, vote yes or no. I don't know. And it's just they list 25 words, and you think, well, I mean, there's a lot more to it than that.
Also, your local people, and that's one thing to really stress because people don't realize. People who are scratching their heads and throwing their hands up in the air and saying, "How did we get where we are at on the national stage?" Well, a lot of that has to do with your local state rep and Senate races because. Your local legislatures do the redistricting, which cause gerrymandering issues. So they're very important races, and people like to look past those. And really, those races shape what happens on a federal level. And there's an interesting study. It shows a group that actually focused on those races, a Republican group, and they've done that to basically capture the Supreme Court, and that's how they've won. They've focused on these local races. And they've worked their way into the national scene. Yeah,
that was tactical on their part. And part of the reason why some of these districts were drawn the way they were is because, you remember in 2010, that was the pushback for the Tea Party and all that. And when you are in office on a census year, which 2010 was and 2020 will be, then you can have greater control over how these districts are drawn. So this year, yes, but also in 2020 as well. Forget about the presidential election. It's also a census year in that way too. So all these things, Brian, I confess, I'm getting more and more into understanding the political workings here, the inner workings of it. So I feel like it's everyone's benefit to learn about it.
Yeah.
You have to know what's going on, and maybe you can actually help your government work for you as opposed to vice versa. So thank you again for stopping by. Some impromptu political commentary between two very reasonable men here, I think. And myself and, well, I'll speak for Brian. I think he's a very reasonable man, and I enjoy his show. We'll look for Connor Lamb and more.
Thank you.
Coming up this weekend here on the River's Edge. Proud to bring you that choice audio content here on the station. Okay, on to segment 2. It's been a very serious edition, a very special edition of Gike's Got Game, but it didn't feel right to just go right into what's wrong with the Penguins. They lost a shootout last night. I don't know. Increasingly, and this goes back to 2 years ago when my son was born, it's just when you have responsibility for another life, at least that's my experience, and also my son was in the hospital for 2 weeks with, we're trying to figure out why seizures happened the first day of his life, caused him to stop breathing. He could have never come home with us in the first place. Has a way of changing your perspective. And I wrote something this morning, in fact, on do-goodery for my Live Well Lucas journal about just that and how certain things that I used to worry about, I don't worry about anymore. That's the positive side. The negative side is certain things that used to really get me worked up and give me joy and give me meaning don't do that anymore. So, there's a fine line between enlightenment and ennui, or in some cases, depression, right? Because what's the definition of depression? It's Things that used to give you joy don't anymore. And, certain things like who was on the Penguins' third line last night, it doesn't get me out of bed in the morning anymore. It used to. It may sound pathetic, but I used to really, really be into all of that. And I'm still into it. I'm still interested by hockey and sports. That's why I continue to work in sports media. That's why I work for RMU, at the athletic department in general, but men's hockey in particular, because I really enjoy hockey. I really enjoy the camaraderie of athletics, the team environment, working toward a common cause. I think all of that is good in general for your spirit. But the details don't. I don't have those emotional ups and downs, I suppose. And like I said, maybe leveling out some of the downs was a good thing. I don't throw my remote control at the wall anymore, and I have done that in the past. When, I think back to my reaction to some Pittsburgh sports losses from age, 15 to 25. They say the male brain does not fully develop until 25, and I believe it because, what you perceive now, what I perceive now at age 33, and in another couple of months I'll be 34, it's such night and day compared to what it was before. And I'm not lecturing you. If you do get a great amount of joy out of, say, a shootout goal in November, then I don't want to take that away from you, but it just doesn't have that same push for me anymore. So that's part of the reason why I love doing this show, actually, and I've been doing it for 3 years, is because I can try to find some greater meaning or some deeper meaning or some alternate meaning in the way that some of these things play out. So yeah, all of it. Like I said in the opening segment, it's all artificially manufactured, right? We're talking war games here in the term of sports, especially in team sports like football, like hockey, physical games, or even games that aren't so physical, basketball, baseball. You're talking about getting teams together and, 1 versus 1, whether it be individual or teams, and it's a zero-sum game. But life isn't that clean and that black and white for the most part, and so that's what I try to convey here on this show. Anyway, I promised some real sports talk, if you will, and I have plenty of it for you coming up right now. I do want to discuss another crossover of sports and life. There were a couple of notes, if you're a Pirates fan, that you probably latched onto this week. And that was I don't want to call it release, but both Jung Ho-Gung and Josh Harrison were allowed to pursue free agency this offseason and talk about two different sides of the same free agency coin there. In the case of Josh Harrison, model citizen, maybe the best man, or right up there tied for the best men I've worked with and had the pleasure of interviewing and speaking to and getting to know a little bit in my jobs here in Pittsburgh. In some ways, covering Major League sports for a couple of seasons over at DKPittsburghSports.com and at Pirates Prospects. Josh Harrison's a guy that you could ask him to do anything on the street, and he'd probably give you whatever he has in his wallet. He'd give you his time. He'd give you his attention. He's just a great guy, and the Pirates declined to pick up his option. I understand it. His production has gone downhill. That's sports, right? Once athletes start to go on the decline, then if you're trying to build a winning team, you pretty much have to cut bait in certain circumstances, or at least try to get these players at a reduced rate. And for Josh Harrison, I'm betting some team out there will pick him up. So I wish him very much well. And as I expressed when I was in his presence before, and also when I was at the Pirates' last home game, I gave him a standing ovation when Clint Hurdle pulled him off the field to allow for such situation, such an expression of appreciation from the crowd. I salute you, Mr. Harrison, and boy, just talk about a guy who's a credit to his family and a credit, I think, to Pittsburgh and to the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then you have Jung Ho-Gung, who, while bursting on the scene in 2015, while having an impressive comeback in 2016 from that awful knee injury that was described multiple times as like a car accident, Jung Ho got himself into a lot of trouble, and as we found out, he's been getting himself into trouble for many years with DUIs in his homeland, with the sexual assault investigation, which was quickly closed when the accuser stopped cooperating with Chicago police. But let's not forget about that as well in the summer of 2016. So he's put himself through, to be more accurate, some difficult situations, and he's put himself in a spot where he doesn't have any more benefit of the doubt. But the Pirates did sacrifice time and effort of coaches, of athletic trainers, of doctors to get him rehab, to get him back on the field, to get him into a spot where they could actually put him into a Major League Baseball game at the end of this past season. And if you just look at the baseball side of it, I think he could contribute to this team. I think he's actually what the Pirates need in some power potential and the ability to play decent defense on the infield, at third base specifically. But I know a lot of you out there don't feel good about if the Pirates were to try to bring him back, you wouldn't feel good about your support of the team. And I get that. So if I had to make a bet, I would say that, yeah, Josh Harrison's going to sign elsewhere as the Pirates declined his option year on his contract. And Gung's option was also declined. But I feel like he's going to be back because of market inefficiencies, of the fact that the Pirates probably know him better than anybody else, and they've put in all this energy and effort. And I know that's maybe a sunk cost fallacy. If you're an economist, you know what I'm talking about. Just because you put a lot of good money after something doesn't mean that you have to continue to do so just because you've invested. You can divest yourself. You can move on. And, in fact, maybe save yourself some further waste of resources if you do move on. But I think there's enough of an upside there, especially at the right price, that the Pirates could bring him back. So it just speaks again to some of the compromises we make as sports fans, as members of the sports media, and I'm both, I suppose, now at this point, especially since I stepped down from covering the Pirates. So I can see it both ways, right? And I can understand where the Pirates might be coming from if they do bring him back. And also there's room for forgiveness, right? There's room for reconciliation. And no matter whether you feel strongly about that because of your faith or because of your personal perspective or personal experience, but I have to admit there is room for that, right? And we don't want to say that people should just be thrown out and discarded because of things they've done in the past that may have been a net negative, may have put other people in danger in the case of Jung Ho Gung, whether it was the DUI or the possible sexual assault that took place. I think that there's a fine line there between being overly forgiving and also being appropriately open to someone changing. That's the point, right? We talk about in this country people being in prisons and whether we help them rehab enough and get their lives back together as opposed to just punishing them. Isn't the goal, one would argue, to turn a person's life around, right? That's the ultimate thing. I talked about that in the first segment, to turn a negative into a positive. If you just punish without the rehab aspect, then where is the positive? I'm not sure it is there, except for the positive, maybe getting someone like Jung Ho Gung off the roads, which, of course, he will be off the roads, as he will never drive again in America, at the very least. I'm not sure what the situation is back home in South Korea, but something to chew on here on your Friday morning as we go into another break here on Geiks Got Game. Again, still trying to give away a T-shirt. I'm going to check Facebook to see if one of you has chimed in and has told me what I'm wearing on my T-shirt to win this Mr. Small's Café T-shirt that I'm holding up. Free clothing being given away here from Mr. Small's Theater. Back in a bit.
Are you hungry for science? I'm Carissa Sedor.
And I'm Ralph Crew.
And we host the Carnegie Science Center's podcast, Science News and Cues.
Also known as Snack.
Join us twice a month as we talk about exciting science news, answer science questions submitted by listeners, that's you, and dive deep into a cool topic every episode.
Curious about exoplanets, glowing animals, or even your own poop? Well, do we have the show for you?
We also feature special guests from octopuses to famous YouTube science stars to NASA scientists.
Join us on Snack, and remember,
stay
hungry for science.
Back inside the Mr. Small's Theater on this All Souls Day, if you're a Catholic, Day of the Dead, if you do celebrate that sort of thing. It can be, it was an odd Halloween, right? Because we kind of glorify these things that go bump in the night and the cheap thrill of being scared. I don't really buy into that. I don't go watch movies like that in theaters or in my own living room. I've never been a big horror fan. But it's just odd, right, with what went on in Squirrel Hill last week. For me, it was. I tend to lean more toward the whimsical side of Halloween anyway, like goofy costumes and just having fun, acting like kids for just a day, to have some whimsy. I lean more toward that anyway, but especially this year, I didn't want to, I don't want to talk about undead and zombies and all that garbage. So that's just my perspective on things. Like I said, I don't judge you. I may comment on what you have to say, but I don't judge you. And in fact, this is your safe space here at Mr. Small's Theater. I am Matt Geica. This is Geik's Got Game. And we are broadcasting live every Friday, well, most Fridays, from 10 to 11 a.m. as my schedule permits. And thanks for hanging in here with me. We do have another winner of Mr. Small's Café t-shirt. His name is Aaron Grice, a Facebook winner. And looks like he's from North Versailles, so he'll be able to skip on down to the station, hopefully, and pick this bad boy up. Talked a little Pirates offseason and, well, some moral dilemmas if you are a Pirates fan, and already the offseason is grinding into position here. David Freese, former Bucco, wasn't it wild watching him and Steve Pearce in some ways light it up in the MLB postseason? Steve Pearce, a guy who couldn't make it with the crappy Pirates of the late 2000s and early 2000 teens, if you will, earlier part of this decade, I'll put it that way. Didn't play more than 60 games in a single Major League season until 2014, just won World Series MVP. So, sometimes it's about personal development as a player. Sometimes it's about also the player being put in a position to succeed. And Steve Pearce hitting against lefties, which he has always done very well against, or at least mildly well against, at least better against than against right-handers. That gave the Red Sox an edge, and what a big performance he had in the latter stages of that World Series, especially Game 4, which was threatening to get away from the Red Sox after the Dodgers struck early, and then Game 5, hitting that first inning dinger against Clayton Kershaw to put the Sox in position to win the World Series. Arguably an all-time great team, and they had Steve Pearce win the MVP for them. Always liked his power when he was coming up in the Pirates system like 15 years ago. And but then once I saw his swing in the majors, I thought, I don't know if he's going to be able to keep up at this level. Well, it took him some time, but he eventually did. So I'm one to more look at the positive of that situation, because sometimes just things aren't going to happen for you in a certain spot. Maybe Jose Bautista would have continued to languish in Pittsburgh if he wasn't traded to the Blue Jays. That one I fault more the Pirates coaching. In the case of Steve Pearce, he was passed around by, 5 different teams? I think, yeah, in fact, it has been 5 different teams that have passed him on, because the Red Sox were the last team in the AL East to employ him. He's achieved AL East bingo, Steve Pearce has, by playing for the Sox, the Blue Jays, the Rays, the Yankees, and the Orioles, in addition to the Pirates. So that's not one where I blame on the Pirates. And I see a lot of social media chatter from fans. I can get it from media professionals who should know better, just going for some cheap heat. Oh, the Pirates could have had this guy. What are they doing letting him go? Well, everybody let him go. Maybe he just needed some time, and maybe needed to mature to a certain level in order to achieve this. So shame on you, sports media people, and most of whom I forget who relied on that to get a few cheap likes and retweets or what have you. I am Matt Geica, G-A-J-T-K-A. This is Geik's Got Game. Coming toward the end of the show, our final several minutes here, and I did want to get to some interesting news in the world of college sports. First of all, on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh, it's a good time to be a Pitt Panthers fan if you're not only a football fan. There are some just Pitt football fans out there, and there are some who support the entire athletic program. You look at men's and women's soccer. They made large strides. The men just got their first win in the ACC tournament. They knocked off a nationally ranked team in Virginia just a couple of nights ago. The women's team doing some similar giant-killing things up there on Cardiac Hill. The volleyball team, women's volleyball at Pitt, they're a phenomenon. They might be winning the whole thing. I'm talking about the NCAAs, not just the ACC. And as I experienced this year in calling some volleyball matches on the campus of RMU, it's a hell of a sport. And if you like fast action, I'm not sure there's a better one for you, because there's minimal downtime between points. The athleticism, I think, is off the charts. I've tried to play volleyball. I can't do it. It's not something I grew up doing. So I appreciate the level of skill it takes to do that. And Pitt volleyball is just destroying people these days. They're in the top 10 nationally, and I saw my good friend and former guest host and guest on this show, James Santelli, tweet out that he went to a match and it was sold out at the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. I think they still call it that, up there on campus at Pitt. So things are going pretty well. And then the encouraging news, if you're a fan of lacrosse, and I know lacrosse is picking up steam in the area, and I work with the women's lacrosse team at RMU, and Pitt is going to add women's lacrosse in a few years. Maybe not great news for the Colonials who I work with, who have to recruit against Pitt now, and the cachet that comes with all that, and being in the ACC and whatnot. But I'm always encouraged to see new sports and universities commit to adding programs as opposed to removing them. So I applaud Athletic Director Heather Like for that. But that's not what got everyone's attention. It was, of course, the football team. Oh, and I should mention that it was a nice attendance for Jason Capel's coaching debut for the Pitt men's basketball team as well. So yeah, it seems like if you're a Panther, it's pretty good times at the moment, even though the football team is probably continuing to disappoint you in certain ways. But one of the main topics around Pitt football, and it will continue to be so, is that do they really belong at Heinz Field? Can they be expected to fill that place? If it's not Penn State, probably not. That's been the proven track record over the last, 15 years since they moved from Pitt Stadium. Make it 18 years, I suppose, as it was the turn of the century when the team moved down to Heinz when Heinz was built in 2001. So it's been a while, and I think we can say the atmosphere there is just unsatisfying. And it's not necessarily because of the raw numbers. It's not Pitt fans' fault that they play in an NFL facility. Very few college teams, in fact, could fill an NFL facility. And this being a pro town first and foremost, they're in a difficult spot. So I think we can all agree that ideally Pitt football would play in a facility that hosts about, 30 to 40,000 people, maybe a little bit over 40,000. Well, basically what they had at Pitt Stadium, but a much more updated facility. And we saw Heather Like this week. She was asked in a meeting with the media about such a possibility. Now, the lease for Pitt at Heinz Field runs out in 2030. So much like I was discussing with PNC Park, which I think also is 2030, and whether the Pirates are necessarily tied to Pittsburgh as tightly as we might think, that's a different topic for a different day. But for Pitt, there's no flight risk of Pitt leaving Pittsburgh, obviously. But there might be a possibility of the team getting a more appropriate facility on campus, perhaps. I don't know if there's any room, any place up there. That's been the main concern. Pitt Stadium was much older, much smaller in terms of a footprint than what a modern football stadium would be for a Division I program. So all those things are obviously thrown into the pot and taken under consideration. But this is the first time that anyone in Pitt leadership has left the door open. Heather Like saying that she wouldn't rule it out in so many words this week. So that got everyone excited. That got people who want to see Pitt be in a more appropriate spot and be able to boast a better atmosphere. Isn't it funny what empty seats do, right? If you sell a place out, I don't care how small it is, it just seems like it's a better atmosphere. And we can look back to 2 weeks ago when the Riverhounds hosted their first USL playoff game against Bethlehem Steel. Yeah, they added a few more seats to the, a couple thousand, or 1,000 plus more seats to the Steel Army supporters section area of Highmark Stadium down there on the south side at Station Square. That boosted the capacity over 5,000, but it was filled. And 5,000 filled, I think, is better than 10,000 half filled. And so much of this stuff is based on perception, right? And I try to boil down to the reality of things and say, okay, 5,000 in one place is the same as 5,000 in another place. In the case of Pitt football, 25,000 at a new Pitt Stadium should be the same in terms of revenue and atmosphere and noise as 25,000 half-filling Heinz Field, or not even half-filling Heinz Field. But we all know it's not, and we all know that seeing every seat taken, or almost every seat taken, does make it seem like a bigger event. So much of sports is entertainment, and so much of entertainment is building hype and managing expectations and making sure you don't overshoot what you can reasonably deliver in terms of public excitement. And that's why the appeal of an on-campus stadium does resonate with Pitt fans, not just because It's just better to play on campus. You can get students there much more easily. It's not so much a pain in the butt for students to get down to Heinz Field. Not that I'm saying it is in the big scheme. You make your way down there, 6 times a fall? It's not that bad. But to put it on campus and to make it more reasonably sized, the reasonable size is what people are excited about, I think, more so than the actual location of the stadium, because then it makes it seem like a bigger deal. And we are all, myself included, I think, at times at the mercy of these split perceptions that we make. What did Malcolm Gladwell call it? I think it was blank. The first perception that we get often is the longest lasting. I mean, you go down to Heinz Field and you see a Pitt football game, and unless it's Penn State in town or some huge glamour opponent, Notre Dame, for instance, unless it's that, it doesn't look like it's that big of a deal because the seats aren't filled. So it's interesting for me to see that Pitt Stadium continues to haunt Pitt fans from the past. And, well, I think it's reason for excitement, to at least a little bit of excitement that might be much deferred. But I think it's legitimate to at least note the fact that Pitt and the people on campus, they aren't deaf to your cries for an on-stadium facility or on-campus facility for Pitt football. I don't talk a lot about football these days, but I know a lot of you care about Pitt, and I know Pitt fans are long-suffering, so as a longtime Pirates fan, I can associate with that most definitely. And like I said at the start, suffering is a strong term. Maybe anything that we get worked up about in sports, positively or negatively, is a bit artificial, but who am I to say that what you care about and what gets you out of bed in the morning is more or less legitimate than what gets me out of bed in the morning? So good to have this discussion with you. I think that's our first ever Pitt football segment here on this show. That's what it took, the possibility of a new stadium on campus 12 years down the road. Apparently, that was enough to hit my sweet spot here on Geiks Got Game. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching if you did. We gave away a couple of T-shirts. That was fun. I felt like a morning zoo host for a bit. That was always an aspiration of mine to at least do one show like that. For Brian Crawford on the ones and twos, flipping all the appropriate switches, thank you for being a part of our show here on the River's Edge. I am Matt Geica, reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast. Talk to you next week here for another edition of Geiks Got Game from Mr. Small's Theater.